Viktor Frankl said, "Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms. To choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's way." This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson. Stay tuned for the next hour as Sue explores the human psyche, what makes us tick, and how to live better, more fulfilled and more meaningful lives. Only on 101.9 High FM.
Hello, this is Sue, and I'm back with you. And today I have a very special guest, Reverend Pastor Mark Leach, who's in Sydney. And our topic today is Never Again is Now. I would like to dedicate today's program to Yom HaZikaron, which comes in tonight. It's the Day of Remembrance, where it's Israel's official day of remembrance for the fallen soldiers and for all the victims of terror. And today, especially now in this moment of history, we remember all our lost who've been killed in this dreadful war that's been going on since the 7th of October. Now, Mark, are you on video? Because I can't actually see you.
I am not.
Okay. Can you see me?
I can see you loud and clear. Yeah, it's all good.
Okay. If you could just turn your video on so that I can see you.
Yes, I've come in with the wrong. I don't know why it's not letting me do that.
It doesn't matter. No.
Hang on, I meant to use camera, Mac OS settings. No, it's going to log me out to. Hang on.
I've seen a lot of you. I've been watching your YouTubes. Let me tell you a little bit about Reverend Mark Leach. He's the co-founder of Never Again is Now, and which is an organization that he started in Australia to fight anti-Semitism, and he's going to tell us a bit about that. He's also the rector, the Reverend at the Darling Street Anglican Church, where he's been for 10 years already. He's a spiritual leader, teacher, organizational architect, and a dreamer of dreams. I love that. You also are a leadership development specialist and an executive coach. And you help high-capacity people in management roles succeed professionally by developing lives of authenticity and integrity. Well, Mark, I could go on and on and on, but what I would like to say is that Billy Graham said, "Courage is contagious. When a brave man takes a stand, the spines of others are often stiffened." And I would like to offer you that quote because I think it's very much who you are as a person and what you are doing. Tell me a little bit about your background. I know it, but our listeners don't know it. And we have a very mixed listenership. So I would like you to tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, Sue, thank you so much for having me on your show. And it's just a delight to talk with you. And I hope your listeners will find some encouragement and something useful in what I have to say. So my background, well, where do you start? I grew up in Africa. I was born up in Zambia. My mother was a German Jew who was a refugee from the Holocaust, fled Frankfurt with her parents in July 1938. My father was a white Afrikaans background guy. He was a secular Roman Catholic guy. My mum was a secular Jew. So I grew up with, double the guilt, but no real religion. Ended up in Cape Town, where I studied medicine. Along the way, I had a powerful encounter with God that led me to leave medicine and become a physician of the soul by an accident of history that was in the Anglican Church. People ask me, Mark, do you know you're Jewish because your mum's Jewish? And I'm like, yep, I know I'm halachically Jewish. But what I say to folk is I say, I identify as 100% Jewish, 100% Christian, and just bad at maths. And
and you're a good person. That's the main thing.
Yeah, I leave it for other folk to work that out, and I leave them confused. But for me, growing up in the shadow of the Shoah and in all some of the challenges of Africa, Rhodesia through the war, I was always aware that anti-Semitism and evil lurked just beneath the surface of the human experience. And so for 30 years, I've been leading churches trying to help Gentile Christians understand the Jewishness of their faith and appreciate that they follow a Jewish savior, a Jewish rabbi in Jesus, contrary to some current propaganda. Jesus wasn't actually Palestinian. He's Jewish, thoroughly a Jewish rabbi. And all the books of the Brit Hadashah, the New Testament, the Christian scriptures are written by Jews. So that's been my journey. And all that changed on October the 7th. I guess in some ways you could describe me as an October 7 Jew. I don't know if that phrase is something you're familiar with. These people whose Jewish souls were kind of activated and went into overdrive after October 7 and in the aftermath of that, which was my experience.
They call it the October the 8th Jews.
Or the October the 8th Jew. Well,
there you are. You're very well in there.
Well, I'm actually an October the 9th Jew because really my life changed on the 9th when there was this rally. My daughter, Freya, who's better looking, more articulate and more famous than me, Freya called me from the University of Sydney where she was studying law and said, "Dad, the pro-Palestinians are planning a rally in the center of Sydney. This is on the 9th. We've got to do something about it." So I called the police. And I said, "Look, I'm an Anglican minister. I hear there's this rally going to happen. It's an unauthorized rally, and I want to come in and counter-protest. I think this is appalling that they're doing what they're doing." And the police said to me, "Well, Mr. Leach, we're advising the Jewish community to stay out of the city of Sydney today. If you come into the city, we can't protect you. And if you do come in and try and do anything, we will arrest you to prevent a breach of the peace."
We're going to do that now.
This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson, only on 101.9 High FM.
Dis-Chem Wellness Clinic for Adults offers convenient and professional care to help you manage health risks. Whether you're having your regular wellness checks, such as blood pressure or cholesterol, Dis-Chem Wellness Clinics offers you a broad range of health screening services, including female health screening with pap smears, family planning, and pregnancy screening. Fast, affordable, and with care. Find your nearest Dis-Chem pharmacies. Better help starts here. This is Sue Jackson, and I'm on the Finding Human program, and my guest today is Reverend Pastor Mark Leach, and we are talking about his experience on the 9th of October after the terrible massacre on the 7th of October by Hamas. Thank you, Mark. Are you back with us?
I'm here. So as I was saying, after hearing that the pro-Palestinians were planning really an anti-Israel celebration of the terrible events of October 7, I decided that I had to take a stand against this. So against the advice of the police, I put on my clerical shirt and I went into the city center. I wrapped up an Israeli flag, put it in my squash bag. And where these, your listeners may not be, or probably don't know, but in Sydney, where this is the famous rally, infamous rally that ended up at the Opera House with, pardon me, those scenes of, those terrible scenes. But the rallies in Sydney start in the square in the center of Sydney, which is between the town hall and the Anglican Cathedral. So it's on my space, my ground. So I took my clerical shirt, my Israeli flag. I wandered through the crowd as they gathered and listened to their hatred and their delight at what had happened on October the 7th. And as they started, I thought, I have to take a stand here. So there were about 1,000 people. I pulled out an Israeli flag. I stood at the back of the square and I waved this flag and I said, I am making a stand for Israel, for the Jewish community, but more broadly for Australia, for the soul of our country, that we cannot let jihadist terrorists full of virulent hatred of the Jews occupy the center of Sydney less than 2 days after the greatest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust, when the blood hadn't dried yet in the sands of southern Israel, but the IDF had not yet gone into Gaza. This was not a protest against IDF action in Gaza. This was pure and simple a celebration of the death of 1,200 Jewish people and torture and massacre. So I waved the flag. A group of keffiyeh-wrapped thugs then chased me out of the square. I ran around the cathedral, up a street, and hid behind a police van while the police dispersed the guys who were chasing me. And that changed my life, because it became very clear to me then that the greatest need we had in Australia was to wake up and mobilize Middle Australia, particularly the Christians, to say, if we don't wake up and stand against this evil, against this hate, and stand with the Jewish community now, we are on the same path as Germany was in the 1930s, where, 20% of the German Christians supported Hitler, 20% of Christians opposed Hitler, but the middle 60% was simply quiet and went along with what happened. They didn't want to get involved. They didn't want to be part of anything political. And I thought, we cannot allow that to happen. That winnable middle 60% of Christians have to know what's going on. They have to be mobilized. So we, 4 of us sitting around after church one Sunday night, said, well, let's do something. Fast forward, we thought, let's run public rallies around the country to unite Christians and Jews and the good citizens of Australia to stand against anti-Semitism. We started off in Sydney. We had 10,000 people show up for an amazing event. Former prime ministers were speaking, and politicians and church leaders and rabbis. And then we ran these events around the country. And what I discovered was that all around the country, there were people of good faith in the Jewish and the Christian and the secular community who wanted to stand against the hate. And so I looked around, and we'd birthed a national movement that was doing something quite unique, bringing Jews and Christians and citizens of Australia together to combat anti-Semitism. And so and then everyone said to me, Mark, you've got to lead this. You've got to lead this. And I was like, well, why me? I've got a job, but it made sense of my background. I'm Jewish enough to feel the existential threat and understand so deeply in a way that I think only a people who've been marginalized and massacred for 2,000 years or more can really understand the weight of this. But also as a follower of Jesus, as a Christian pastor, I also understood the Christian side of things and why it was utterly imperative for Christians to stand up. And I had connections in both. So we set this organization up. Actually, in September, I finished up as a pastor to run this movement full time. So I've been full time schlepping around the country and around the world, uniting Christians and Jews, really to fight for Western civilization, because our theory of change was, the best way to keep the Jewish community and the diaspora safe and to keep Israel safe is to renew our commitment to Western civilization. And we can talk more about what that means, but that's what we're doing, and that's what I'm doing, and, here we are. And
just tell me, Mark, how have you been accepted in the Orthodox Jewish sector, actually just the Jewish sector as a whole? Because, why I'm asking you that is because so often, even when I put out the message that, you were coming on my program, I was actually asked, were you going to try and convert my Jewish listeners? And I said, I will ask Mark himself that question. So
that is such a wonderful question. And it's funny, no one's asked me that to my face, but I hear it all the time, and I understand it.
See your face.
Yeah, I'll look. So the first shul I went to was Central Synagogue here in Sydney, Bondi Junction. Levi Wolf is the rabbi, and he's become a friend, and he invited me to come and speak to the congregation and after the events of October the 9th. And he welcomed me, and he said, I'd like to introduce the Reverend Mark Leach. Mark is a Christian pastor. His mother was a German Jew, and he's as Jewish as you and as me and as anyone in this crowd. And people stood up and applauded and clapped. And so I have experienced nothing but love and affection and the warmest of all welcomes from people. And I still understand the suspicion, Christians, and one of the reasons I'm so well suited to do this job is I can say, yeah, as a Christian pastor, the church has a terrible record of anti-Semitism, and And I get that, but that anti-Semitism is a bug, not a feature of Christianity. And in terms of converting people, that's not my job at all. I've been saying to everyone, to the Jewish folk I speak to, I just say, you need God. You need to be more, you need to go back to shul. You need to connect with God. In this season, you and I cannot get through this without God. And so I call on the Christians to be more Christian, the Jews to be more Jewish, and it seems to work. Now, I'm really happy to have theological conversations about the nature of divinity and who Jesus was and how we understand that. But that doesn't seem to, that's not my particular calling at the moment. There's vital work to do to stand together as one family. I mean, I really do think the Christians and the Jews are like estranged siblings almost, and I know that the Christian community, the New Testament scriptures themselves say that Christians owe a debt to the Jewish community. I mean, the New Testament is a thoroughly Jewish book, but even right at the inception, as Gentiles came into the early church, there was this sort of building suspicion of the Jewish folk and anti-Semitism, and it's addressed right there in the New Testament, which your listeners may not be aware of. And it's the whole book of this whole long letter of Romans addresses in some detail how Gentile and Jewish background followers of Jesus should relate to each other. And it's so clear Gentile Christians owe a debt to the Jewish people. Every spiritual blessing any Christian claims to have is as a direct result of the Jewish people. And the church should never forget that.
Well, you certainly answered that question. Now, it says Never Again is now, it's an acronym name, Christian grassroots movement educating and mobilizing Christians and all Australians to stand against the most ancient of racial hatreds. Now, I think a lot of people have such fear at the thought of standing against these mobs of Jew haters. So you yourself said you were really afraid. So initially, when you first started this, you didn't have 10,000 people marching with you or standing with you. How many of you were there at the time when you first started? One.
It was just me at that first rally. Now there was another Mark from the Jewish community who tried to do what I did a little later, but he got bailed off by the police before he could even get his flag out of his bag. But at the time it was just me. Courage is not the absence of fear; it's the choice to do what's right in the presence of fear.
Absolutely.
And so my concern was that I'd get stabbed. I mean, people were very, very, very aggressive in that first rally, and so I was concerned at the level of hostility and aggression, but you can't let that stop you from doing what's right. I mean, they're bullies, and now I just say to people, and when I talk to, I just say when people say, "Oh, Mark, aren't you scared?" I'm like, you know what? I'm not in a tunnel in Gaza. This is nothing. Like, come on. The Jewish community, and I get it. In Australia, so many of the Jewish community are descendants of survivors of the Holocaust, and so there's this kind of narrative and experience of intergenerational trauma and fear, and I totally get that. But I say to the Christians, you're the majority in this country. You have no reason to fear. Like, come on, guys. We are standing. We are in a civilizational war. Make no mistake. You know this. There is, and the war is being fought. It's a hot war in Israel at the moment, but it's an information war around the world, and it's a war against jihadist Islam and the radical left who want to pull down and destroy Western civilization, the radical neo-Marxist left and jihadist Islam are united in their commitment to destroy Western culture and civilization that is Jewish and Christian. This is, and so we have to protect it. If what we have is as I think it is, one of the greatest, if not the greatest, achievement of our species, we have to protect this civilization. We have to fight for these ideas, not just for our good, but for the good of our children and our grandchildren and future generations.
I have to agree with you. And Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs, who I'm very prone to quote, I must admit, he, of blessed memory, I might add, but he was saying that when he went to Auschwitz, he wept when he saw the photos of the little shoes, the photos of the little children, the hair. The Nazis had kept everything, so they couldn't deny a thing. And he was saying that people have said, where was God in the Holocaust? And he said, it was in your brother's blood is crying to me from the ground. And he was saying that we have to often search for our answers and where was God? And, I was in Israel last month, and I saw a beautiful picture of Israeli soldiers handing water to some of the little Gazan children who had obviously been relocated and taken out of their war-torn areas. And they were handing water to them. And I thought to myself, well, there is God, even in Gaza, handing water to these little children. And then there was that story of the dog who was saved, Billy the dog, by an Israeli soldier. And the story goes on to say that the Israeli soldier said to the dog, he saw the dog in the ruins of Gaza, and he said, "Shalom," and the dog's tail started wagging and it came towards him and he couldn't leave it behind. And I thought again, well, there was God again in the ruins of Gaza. And obviously, as a Jew, and I know I can speak for my immediate family and say we are totally shocked at what the scenes coming out of Gaza. But at the same time, we realize this is an existential battle, not just for the soul of Israel, but for the soul of quite honestly, Western civilization.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I mean, in the work I do, so I speak at groups all around the country and on podcasts, and I will regularly have people get very angry with me about my support of what the IDF and what Israel is doing in Gaza and the morality of that war. And every time I speak to a non-Jewish audience, there will be someone who will tell me something along the lines of, the reason people hate the Jews is because of what they're doing in Gaza. And that's so profoundly, deeply wrong at so many levels. But I just say, it is war, it is evil. I mean, what is happening in Gaza, like the destruction of life is evil, but it's a lesser of two evils. What Israel is facing is in my view, speaking theologically, I would say a satanic death cult. I mean, the commitment of the jihadi cult to the eradication of the Jewish people and the eradication of any Jewish presence in the land is something they don't hide. It's animated them. It's driven everything they've done in Gaza since Israel pulled out and before. So I think and I think, what's the option? You just allow yourself to be massacred. You have to fight. And the thing about Israel, which having been there, you'll know this. I mean, the IDF in Gaza, these are beautiful young 20, 21, 22-year-old reservists. I mean, extraordinary. They're not evil, maniacal demons from hell perpetrating genocide and delighting in massacring babies. I mean, it's this complete inversion of, what happened on October 7 being projected onto the IDF. So But still, one of the great tragedies is we're asking these beautiful young Israeli kids to go in and kill people.
Mm-hmm.
But that's war, and it's evil and it's tragic, but that's how you win wars. You kill your enemy, you kill enough of your enemy until their leadership decides to surrender.
Well, it's strange that you should say that about the surrender, because I was sent a little clip, an audio clip today, and it was of a man standing in front of a Palestinian or Gazan, standing in front of a group of Gazan little children.
Mm-hmm.
And he was obviously shouting to them, and it was on an Arabic social media clip. And it shows these Gazan children are being taught who destroyed Gaza, and they're shouting Hamas.
Yes.
Who made us live in tents? Hamas. So maybe the tide is turning, or maybe this is to fool us all, this little clip. But when I looked at those little children, I just thought, please, God, don't allow them to have another generation of hatred and for us all. But Mark, going back to your Never Again is Now, this is an incredible purpose that you have brought into your own lives. Your own life. And I see that your daughter is also involved, your daughter Freya, is that the right word?
Yeah, that's it. Yep, that's her name. Yep.
Yeah, and we're going to ad break, and I'm going to get back to Freya in a minute.
This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson, only on 101.9 High FM.
Hello, this is Sue, and I'm back with Reverend Mark Leach. And if you'd like to telegram us, please do so on 061 895 1019. I see a private message has come through to me asking for details about you, which we'll give at the end. But I would like to go back to your daughter, Freya, and tell me about her, because she's also very involved in standing against hatred, isn't she?
Yeah, so Freya, where do I even start? I have two kids, Oliver and Freya. Freya's 22, got married in December. And, she's grown up in a family where around the table we've always talked about the big issues in life. From the age of 14, she's been reading, Friedrich Hayek, The Road to Serfdom, and philosophy and politics. And she's always been, it's interesting how she's always been very aware and proud of her Jewishness, the Jewish connection. She's done a couple of trips to Israel. She did the March of the Living, and she was back in Israel last year in July. In fact, I was there as well. We got to have Shabbat dinner out in Jerusalem on a rooftop, which was very special.
Oh, lucky.
But in July 23, then she was back last year. She's very involved in politics. She's highly articulate. She has a big media presence. So there's a Sky News is a big national news TV station. So she's a regular contributor there, and mostly in the political space. She works for a group, the Liberal Party, which is the sort of centre-right conservative party here in Australia, for their think tank developing policy. She stood as an MP in our state elections in our area. So a couple of years ago,
at 22, I can't believe it.
She was. I think she was 20 when she ran for Parliament. It was a hard left Greens seat, so she was never going to win. But she got very involved, and really believes it's vital for young people to be involved in politics. And it's vital to stand for Western civilization and for the Judeo-Christian values that have generated this. And she's fiercely committed to opposing anti-Semitism in all its forms, and in supporting our Australia being a staunch ally of Israel. One of our closest friends, a daughter who's Freya's age, actually she's from Melbourne, did the Lone Soldier program in the IDF. And Freya spent a bunch of time with her and her friends when she was in Israel last year. And it just came back so inspired with the caliber of her peers, the young people in Australia, compared to young people in Israel. So, in Australia, we have this real crisis amongst sort of the Gen Zs, a crisis of meaninglessness and sort of depression and anxiety and a general anomie and hopelessness. And then you go to Israel and there are these extraordinary people fighting to protect their family, their parents, their country, with purpose and meaning. So that the war has given them, it's a terrible, terrible thing they're doing. But also, they are discovering, as many soldiers do, when you fight a just war in a moral army, you will look back on that often as the best time of your life if you survive, obviously. But she's so passionate about all of that. And, fearless. She's fearless. So that's...
Sounds like it, which is absolutely fantastic. It really is. But... Mark, going back again now to Australia, because you were saying that Australia, is a supporter of Israel. Why do you think that there is such hatred towards Israel by certain sectors of the Australian population?
I would say some of them are... I think the anti-Israel, anti-Zionist rhetoric is just an excuse. It's a flimsy cover for a much deeper primal hatred of the Jewish people that lurks in the human soul for thousands of years. I think that some of the Australian community are jihadist Islamists who firmly believe that Israel has no right to exist and needs to be destroyed as a offense against Islam, a land under Islam, a land that has been conquered and once ruled by Islam, forever belongs to Islam. And so every Muslim is duty bound to reclaim the land as part of the Islamic community or caliphate. So there are some of those. And the information war and the propaganda that the Muslim Brotherhood have waged and the Arab community have waged since 1948, well, actually probably the mid-50s, against Israel has been relentless and in the last 20 years incredibly well-funded and strategic. And they've made allies with the left, with the radical left. Mm-hmm. And they believe, because they've been taught since the 1960s that the world is neatly understood as being made up of oppressed and oppressors, and the neo-Marxist identity politics that then say history moves as the oppressed overthrow the oppressor by any means necessary, and that if you're to be a good, virtuous person, you must stand on the side of the oppressed. This has primed the left in Australia to believe the propaganda that Israel is the oppressor, the colonial settler oppressor state who is all evil, and therefore you must support resistance by any means against this oppressive evil, even including supporting Hamas and Hezbollah and the evil they perpetrate. And it's an absolute master stroke of propaganda, financed and strategically rolled out through our universities and our bureaucracies and our cultures in the West. So we're tearing ourselves apart as we believe the Muslim Brotherhood and Marxist lies about Israel and about ourselves. I mean, and you will know this, your listeners in South Africa, you will be all too familiar of the framing of oppressor-oppressed, racial identity politics to cover over all evil, the inversion of reality in your own context.
Absolutely.
It's the same dynamic, and it's evil and destructive. We have to fight against it, and we've all been caught napping.
And I was reading an article a while ago about, we're going to ad breaks. I'll go back to that in a minute.
This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson, only on 101.9 High FM.
Hello, this is Sue Jackson, and I'm back with Reverend Mark Leach. And Mark, what I was about to tell you there was that I was reading this article, and it said that in July 1938, there was a conference at Evian in France, and not one of the 32 countries represented opened their doors to the Jews. Not Britain, not the USA, not Canada, and not Australia. And it went on to say if Israel had existed then, history would have been very, very different. And I think that's what we're looking again at the moment. With you, with your incredible outreach program of Never Again Is Now, that's exactly, you're saying we will not ever go back to that stage where no Jew is accepted anywhere. And I see you've also gone mobile. I love that, because here in South Africa at one stage, there were banners up over our highways. I won't even say what they were, but let's just put it this way, very anti-Jew and anti-Israel. Yeah. So tell me about going mobile. I did see your picture of a gorgeous truck, I think it was, with a big banner on it. Tell me about
Yes. So we had Anzac Day, which is our commemoration of Australia's wars and how we've gone to fight in support of freedom and civilization. And what many people don't know is that the Jewish Australians have fought in all the wars and have been in fact, as a proportion of their community, have been overrepresented, particularly in the First and Second World Wars. And so we've set up chapters of Never Again Is Now all around the country. Our goal is to mobilize everyday Aussies to stand against anti-Semitism. And a couple of people who are sort of military history buffs had this idea, why don't we get these mobile billboards to tell the story, put a picture of a Jewish digger, a Jewish soldier in First World War uniform with the slogan, that the Jewish diggers fought for Australia. Now Australians need to stand with the Jewish community. And so this came up, I didn't even know it was happening, and then it bubbled up, and from idea to delivery took us 10 days. We raised a bunch of money. We put these massive billboards on the back of trucks, and for the 3 days in the lead up to Anzac Day, which was on a Friday, so Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we had these billboards driving around key parts of the cities in Australia, helping Australians realize that actually the Jewish community are amazing, brave, contributing citizens who deserve our admiration, our protection, and our friendship and our allyship. So we did that. We combined it with a social media campaign, and it was great. So we've got to get the message out there, and we've got to tell you that.
If you come to South Africa, please bring a few of these banners with you.
Well, I'm overdue for a visit back to South Africa. So if any of your listeners, I'd be delighted to come to South Africa and speak at events and try and encourage the Jewish community and the Christian community, bring folk together. So I'd be delighted to do that. Yeah.
On that note, because I'm hoping people will definitely want to reach out to you, can we give a few of your details out of how to get hold of you?
Yeah, the easiest is to go to our website, neveragainisnow.com.au, and everything is there. Neveragainisnow.com.au, and I'd encourage your listeners to sign up, join the movement. You'll get a weekly email from me. We could set up a Never Again Is Now chapter in Joburg and in Cape Town, bringing Christians and Jewish folk together, sharing resources and ideas and inspiration. This doesn't have to just be an Australian thing. So go to the website, go onto our socials, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Follow me on Twitter under my name, Mark Leach. There's a whole bunch of things we're doing, and join the movement. And for the Jewish people to know, well, and for all good people, we're not alone in this. We have to stand together. This battle. This isn't going to go away. Let me tell you, when the fighting stops in Gaza, as it will, this war is not going away anytime soon. This is a civilizational battle. I say, so you probably, I don't know if your listeners know this, but I might ask you this question. How many jihadist terror attacks, Islamic jihadist terror attacks, do you think there have been around the world since 9/11? So over the last 25 years, how many Islamic jihadist terror attacks do you think there have been globally?
I can't answer that except to say that a lot of them have been against fellow Muslims.
Correct. Okay, so we'll pick a number. If you had to pick a number.
Well, just thinking of Africa on its own, I would say probably about 50.
Okay, so in the last 20 years, 25 years since 9/11, there have been somewhere between 44 and 46,000 recorded jihadist terror attacks.
No.
And many are one Islamic group against another, but most of them are Christians being massacred. You'll know this from northern Nigeria.
Yes.
Mozambique has an Islamic insurgency. All around the world, there's a relentless battle against jihadist Islamism going on, and it's violent. It's medieval. It's terrible. Israel is fighting on behalf of all of us at the moment. I mean, this is not October 7 shows us what happens when the caliphate comes to town. Over the Easter weekend, there were Christians massacred in Nigeria. The week before that, there were 70 Christians beheaded by a jihadist group in the Congo. So we're all in this together. We've got to link arms. We've got to lean into a life of love and of truth and of justice, and we've got to work together for our culture.
Absolutely. And we need to understand that first they were going to go for the little evil, which is who they look at Israel as being that, and then the bigger evil, which is the West. So Correct. We are fighting a big battle for humanity at the moment. And Mark, I'm being told to wrap up. Would you mind coming back on my program sometime? Because I would love to hear. I know your brother is of a different faith as well. I don't know if you want to say what he is, but
my brother converted to Islam.
Yeah.
I would be delighted to come back anytime. I have more things to say than your listeners could possibly tolerate, I'm sure. So.
And I have a lot to still ask you. Thank you so much for being on my program, Mark. And as we said, please, if you'd like to get hold of the Mark, you can on Never Again Is Now, which is one word, .com.au. And it's been an absolute pleasure having you with me. Next time, hopefully, I can see your face. So if I have questions, I can ask you straight to your face. But I'd also like to thank Gail Cassidy, who put us together, and Leach, who got us together. It took a while working out all the different times. But I'd like to end with what Theodore Roosevelt said. Courage is not having the strength to go on. It is going on when you don't have the strength. Mark, I wish you that strength to go on and to fight for what is right, for you, for us, for the world. How would you like to end?
Well, Sue, I'd like to just wish God's richest blessing on you and all your listeners. May your lives be full of love and joy and peace.
Thank you so much, Mark, and I will be in touch. I see I've got a message coming through from White River, and it says, what a spectacular man. Thank you, Annette. There you are. Good on you.